Donald Goines provided perhaps the most sustained, multifaceted, realistic fiction picture ever created by one author of the lives, choices, and frustrations of underworld ghetto blacks. Almost single-handedly, Goines established conventions and the popular momentum for a new fictional genre, which could be called ghetto realism. Professor Greg Good, University of Rochester. Mahoroi, and welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. On this edition of Ralph Reads, I will bring the Donald Goines classic Black Girl Lost to a close. So without wasting any more time, let the reading commence. Chapter 12. Detectives Fisher and Horner walked out of Sammy's whiskey store dumbfounded. He had been sure the man would help them, but it had turned out to be just the opposite. Sammy hadn't given them any information about Sandra. The main thing he had said was that if she was in trouble, would the policemen please notify him so that he could come down and help the girl. Maybe we got the wrong girl, Horner said as they got in the car. From what that old guy says, this girl would be an angel, not one who would allow herself to get mixed up in any kind of murder. Fisher shook his head. No, this is our girl, all right. She was arrested in school with Chink when he got busted for dope. She ain't no damn angel. You can bet on that. She's just a smart little bitch that's gotten in deeper than she probably wanted to. Horner pulled away from the curb. Well, Fish, he asked, where to from here? You checked with that probation department, Jerry. What was that address they gave you? Fisher asked. Horner motioned to some paper on the seat. It's written down on that top piece of paper, but I don't think it will do any good. The probation worker said that when she didn't report, he went by this address and the caretaker told him that he believed she had moved out. He'd seen her and another woman move some clothes out of the place. Fisher was silent for a moment. Let's go by and check out this guy's wife. Jimmy said she got a ride home with Sandra, so just maybe she was the broad that helped her to move. Fisher gave him the address and sat back and relaxed. He was beginning to like working with the quiet colored man. The young guy didn't ask too many silly questions. Above all, he didn't talk too much. If there was one thing Fisher hated, it was being stuck with an officer who talked all the goddamn time. He hated it. In less than 10 minutes, Horner was parking in front of the address that Fisher had given him. The two men walked up the sidewalk together. School children walking past gave the two officers plenty of room. They knew policemen when they saw them. Shirley came to the door at once. She opened it wide. Both of the men noticed that she had been crying. Won't you come in, she said and stepped back, allowing the men room to pass. We'd like to ask you a few questions, Fisher began as she followed them into the room. She motioned for them to sit on the couch. You'll have to pardon me, she said quickly. I've just gotten the news about Jimmy. I don't know what could have gotten into him. He didn't have any reason to run, she said flatly. We talked to him early this morning, Horner said quietly, and it seems as if this friend of his, Chink, talked him into running. Shirley cursed angrily. It must have been that way because he sure didn't have any reason to run. I don't see how he allowed someone to talk him into running though. I don't either, Fisher thought coldly. The bastard probably ran on his own or either begged the other kid to take him along. When he spoke, it was altogether different from what he had been thinking. The only chance Jimmy has of clearing himself is for us to catch up with Chink. If we don't, Jimmy has this murder charge to ride out all by his lonesome. For a minute, the men thought she was going to burst out crying, but she held back the flood of tears. I don't know how I can help you, she said. Where do you think they might have gone? Horner asked quickly. Any kind of information you can give us to where they might have gone to hole up. They have to have an apartment somewhere. Shirley hesitated, then said quietly, I don't know if it will help or not, but I went with Sandra to their old apartment where she picked up some clothes. Later on, we went over on 110th. She didn't know that I knew about it, but she asked an old man who was working outside where the manager was, and he pointed out the manager's apartment. She glanced around to see if they were listening, then continued. While she was inside, the old man came over to the car and asked me if we were going to rent out one of the apartments. I didn't know at the time if she was or not, but I figured she was. She stayed inside the manager's apartment about 15 minutes and then came out. When she got back in the car, she tried to make me believe that she had stopped off to see a friend. Fisher glanced over at his partner. Can you remember what that address was? He asked sharply. Yes, she answered, shaking her head. It was simple to remember, and she gave him the address. But I don't know what apartment she took. In fact, I'm not even sure she took one, but I believe she did. I really do. So do we, Fisher exclaimed quickly. Both men got up at the same time. We'll be checking with you, Fisher said as they started to go out. Shirley followed them to the door. I hope you will do what you can to help Jimmy out, she begged as the men prepared to leave. We'll do what we can, Fisher said over his shoulder, now in a hurry to get away from the woman with such misery in her eyes. Fisher got in and drove. The men were silent on the short trip, each man deep in his own thoughts. Horner wished the end would come quick so that he could get home and get some sleep. The call came over the radio about the killing of Tree. Well, I'll be dead! I'll bet money it's got something to do with this case, Fisher stated as he speeded up. You think we ought to swing by there and check it out first, Fish, or go on over to the address we got? Nah, the body will wait or be down at the morgue, but Chink won't. He might be preparing to leave town now. If we can catch him at this address, we'll have the case busted wide open. When they pulled up at the apartment building, there was a deputy sheriff's car already there. Since it was on 110th, it was out of the Los Angeles Police Department's jurisdiction. The two detectives got out and walked up the sidewalk. They met the single deputy coming down the walk. Fisher stopped and showed his badge to the deputy. What's going on here? He inquired. I got a call to check out a man in the car who was supposed to be hurt, the deputy stated. It seems as if some guy pulled up in the car but was too hurt to get out. He blew his car horn and this dame came running out of that apartment. He pointed over his shoulder and got in the car and pulled off. The deputy pointed out the caretaker, who was standing in the background watching everything. That old guy over there can fill you in. He's the one who made the call. Thanks, Fisher said, and led his partner over towards the caretaker. The old man was only too glad to talk. He told them about all the blood he had seen in the car. Horner walked back to the car and got the mugshot of Chink, came back and stuck it under the old man's nose. Just a minute, the old man said, and reached in his pocket and got out his glasses. He took one good look at the picture and said, That's him! That's the boy I seen! I don't think I can ever forget that face! No siree! I remember wondering to myself how such an ugly bastard ever got with such a pretty woman. I mean, I don't know for sure if it's even his girlfriend or not, but I ain't never seen her messing with no other man. It seems as if this is the first man I've ever really seen her with. He was driving her car. I know that for a fact, because I've seen her drive it way too many times. Fine. That's just fine, old-timer. You have really helped us out, Fisher said, making his getaway from the old man. He led the way back to the car and got in on the driver's side. After he started the motor, Horner asked, You don't think we should check out the apartment, Fisher? Fisher shrugged his shoulders. I don't think it's really necessary this time, Jerry. We're more interested in putting our hands on this character, Chink. I doubt seriously if there's anything we could find in the apartment that might put us onto them. If he's hurt and hurt bad, from what the old man says, the girl is running scared. She has to find somewhere to take him. She didn't take him upstairs probably because of her fear of the caretaker calling the police. He hesitated briefly, then continued. Just maybe, she might have gone back to her mother's house. She might believe they will be safe there. And besides, she could get some help. You got her mother's address there? Horner glanced to his papers. Yeah, here it is. He quickly read off the address. Fisher made a turn on Western and headed for the address. In minutes he was there. Horner jumped out and led the way up the filthy steps, stepping over trash that people had been too lazy to carry to the alley. There was noise coming from the apartment. They stood outside the door listening. Fisher raised his fist and knocked. He had to knock again before there was an answer. Who the fuck is it? A woman asked in a husky voice. It's the police, Fisher roared loudly. A sudden silence answered his reply. The door opened slightly. What do you want here? Ain't nobody called no goddamn police, and if they did, we ain't been making that much motherfucking noise, the woman said belligerently as she opened the door the rest of the way. I want to ask you a few questions about your daughter, Fisher stated as he stepped into the room. Bottles were everywhere, with drunks sitting in the chairs and on the couch. He knew at once that the couple he searched for wouldn't be there. Well, I don't know anything about her or where she might be, the woman answered honestly. I ain't seen her in over a month. She come by one day last month and left me a few dollars, but that's the last time I saw her, and that's the truth. As the woman talked, Horner walked around the living room. He opened the bedroom and glanced in. Nothing. He gave up and came back to where Fisher was. The two men glanced at each other. There was an understanding that didn't need words. Both men realized that they were wasting their time. Fisher removed the card from his pocket. If you should ever see your daughter again, please get in touch with me. It will be for her best interests if you do, Fisher stated, realizing as he said it that the woman wouldn't pay any attention to him. I sure will, she replied, lying through her teeth. Don't even worry about it. If she shows up around here, well, I'll just make her wait until I get in touch with you, officer. I know you will, Fisher said coldly as he started from the apartment. When they reached the hallway, he turned to Horner and spoke. I can easily see why. She left home at such an early age, he said quietly. Sometimes when you see homes like that, Horner stated harshly, you can't help but wonder why all the ghetto children don't turn out bad. That's crap, Jerry. You came up in the ghetto, but you're not mixed up in some shit like this, Fisher said coldly. I had parents that cared, Fish. They saw to it that I had everything they could give me. If it wasn't new clothes, it was love and attention. Can you imagine that fucking bitch back there giving her daughter the love and care she needed? Shit. These kids we're looking for, both of them should be going to school. Instead, here they are out here in the streets, wanted for murder. For one of the few times in his life, Fisher was caught for words. He didn't know what to say. What Horner said was true, but pity was something they couldn't allow to come into their lives while working. Whatever the age of the suspect, murder had been committed, and they had a job to do. Chapter 13. Sandra washed the wounds carefully. Chink slipped into the peacefulness of sleep. He tossed and turned, but didn't wake up. She worked faster now, but there was only so much she can do. She realized that if she wanted Chink to live, she'd have to have a doctor for him. But where the fuck could she possibly get a doctor? And she couldn't stop the bleeding. Bleeding from the wound in his chest had stopped, but the stomach wound wouldn't. After she had cleaned him up, she sat on the floor beside Chink's prone figure. He slowly opened his eyes. Sandra, he said, his voice sounding stronger as he talked. I ain't gonna make it, baby, he stated. She clutched his hand to her chest. Don't say such things, Chink. You're gonna make it, honey. If I could get a goddamn doctor for you. Chink shook his head. That's death, baby. I don't want no doctor, honey. I mean that. If you get one, it will cause too much trouble. I got you in enough trouble already. If a doc comes, you'd have to hold a gun on him and make him take the bullets out. And I don't think he could do it here. Now listen, baby. I don't plan on going to no hospital, because I don't want to end up spending the rest of my days in prison. You hear, Sandra? I fucking mean it, baby. I'd rather die than be locked up for the rest of my days. You hear what I'm saying, baby? I'm too young, honey. I couldn't adjust to prison life. I can't stand the bars. I damn near went crazy when I was locked up this time. The camp was alright, but not the county jail, honey. I mean it. I can't stand the bars. He dropped back to the floor, holding his stomach. Chink! Chink! She cried. You want me to get you on the bed, Daddy? Maybe it will be more comfortable, she said, crying all the time. He managed to shake his head. Baby, the floor is cool. I mean it. I slept on one all my life damn near, so it's only right that I die on one. You ain't gonna die, Daddy. You just ain't, she screamed. He tried to smile at her. It ain't nothing we can do about it, Sandra. He reached up and rubbed her cheek. Baby, I wish you would leave. Ain't no way you can be really tied in with the killing, except that you picked me up on the highway, and there ain't no way for them to prove that unless you say something about it, he warned. Listen now, baby. When I'm gone, the police are going to give you a hard fucking time. But if you do like I say, you can come from under it. It might be hard on you for a while, but they'll have to cut you loose. You know what I'm saying, baby? What about you, honey? What about you, Chink? She asked, crying. Don't worry about me. My life is finished, honey. I ain't gonna ever leave this apartment alive. I can feel it, baby. I mean it. I'm above and beyond the reach of the police now, honey, he answered her slowly. As he held her hand, he slipped back into the black recesses of unconsciousness. As she stared down at his silent form, she wondered if she could slip out and go for a doctor. She knew where a black doctor was. If she took a pistol along, she believed she could force him to come with her. She had almost made up her mind to go when he regained consciousness. For a minute, I thought you had left me, he said as soon as he was awake. Please don't leave, Sandra. Please don't leave me. Please don't go for no reason. Not until after I'm gone. Will you promise me that, honey? Please? She stared down into his face. The tears running down her cheeks fell on his upturned face. She dropped her head down on his chest, crying silently. The sobs escaped from her slowly at first, but then became louder. He managed to raise his hand and stroke her hair. Don't cry, baby. Please don't cry. It ain't nothing to cry about. Think about all the good things we had together. Don't think about the worst, just the good. I'm just glad to even be here with you, Sandra. Ain't nothing promised to us, but we do have these few minutes together. Help me to cherish them, honey. Please don't waste them crying. She fought back the tears. I've got to be brave, she told herself over and over again. She raised her head and smiled down at him. I understand, Daddy. I really do. He grinned and tried to sit up. Don't do that, Daddy, she cautioned, as she saw the look of pain dash across his face. Just relax. Don't strain yourself. She leaned down and kissed his cheek, then kissed him softly on the lips. Put something on the box, baby, he asked her quietly. She glanced away, not wanting to remind him that the men had taken the record player when they robbed her. She got up and went over and put on the small radio that they had left behind. She found a good station playing the latest in soul music and left it there. Chink didn't seem to notice the difference the radio made, or else he didn't mention it. Sandra glanced around for something to put under his head. Everything had been removed, as far as the pillows and bedding. She balled her sweater up and put it under his head. Slowly, she washed away the bleeding, which seemed to be flowing faster. Again, she had to fight back tears as she tried unsuccessfully to stop the flow of blood. What can I do? What can I do? The thought endlessly ran through her mind. Now that he had made her promise not to leave, her hands were tied. There was no way she could go for a doctor now without breaking her word to him. If she left and he awoke and found her gone, he might just die while she was gone. If that happened, she would never be able to forgive herself. She would have missed his last moments alive, and she had come to accept the fact that he was going to die. There was nothing she could do about it except stay beside him and make his passing as easy as possible. One thing she promised herself, she would never let them take him alive. No, that she couldn't allow. For him to wake up in a prison ward was something she wouldn't allow to happen. A thought flashed across her mind. Chink, chink, chink. Suppose I take you to a doctor's office and hold a gun on him, Daddy, until he's closed your wounds. Then, Daddy, we might just have a chance. We got the car. All we need is a running chance. With your wounds took care of right, you wouldn't have to think about dying. Hey, baby, let's be for real. There will be nurses to keep away from a phone. We need at least 2 good men with guns to hold off everybody. Chink reached up for her and she slipped down beside him. I can dig where you're coming from, but it just won't work. Why have my precious time wasted in a fruitless shootout, baby, when I could spend it so nicely with you? He kissed her, a tender kiss that expressed all his love. Slowly, he wiped the tears from her eyes. Honey, Sandra began, I was only thinking about tomorrow. If we could get you together, Daddy, I believe we could make it. She felt in her heart that it was true. She decided to try again. Nothing imagined could be too wild. Honey, I even believe that we could rip off a plane and go to Cuba or something. But don't give up on me. I'll go down with you all the way, Daddy. I mean it. I don't care what we have to do. Just tell me what, and I'll go along with the program. What could he say? How could you tell a woman that you love that the program is over? He'd never make it to the airport, and then she'd be alone. What good would he be if something started and he couldn't even stand up alone? Sandra, listen, honey. There ain't never been no doubt in my mind about whether or not you would go along with the program. You've been doing that ever since you became my woman. It ain't about that, baby. I wish it was some way I could make you understand. Nothing in this world could make me any happier than I am right now, holding you in my arms. He started to cough, and Sandra sat up. Chink, can I get you something? Maybe some water or something? She stared at him anxiously. He managed to control the coughing. Can you get me anything? He rubbed her arm slowly. Yes, if I could, there would be time enough for me to spend another night in your arms if you could give me that, Sandra. If I make it up until tonight, let me sleep in your arms. She grinned and got up. She reached down and tried to raise him. It's night now, honey. Let me put you to bed. He caught on to her meaning and struggled to rise. As the pain flooded through him, he thought about holding her again in a lover's embrace. Somehow, she managed to get him on his feet. With all his weight across her shoulders, she dragged him to the bedroom. Slowly, she undressed him, taking each piece off slowly so that it wouldn't hurt him. Darling, you'd make a beggar's dream come true, he said tenderly from the bed. He lay back and drifted off into the foggish world of fever. He tossed and turned, moaning out. He imagined himself in the rear of the pool room where he had grown up. He was trying to sleep, but it was cold. The floor under him didn't seem to have any heat to it. He remembered slipping into the kitchen and trying to turn on the kitchen stove. Being too young to know how to light a fire, he had just turned on the knobs like he saw his father do. Then he had stretched out on the floor next to the stove. It was seemed like minutes. He remembered the light feeling that came to his head. He was about to slip off into sleep when he heard his father curse, then come running into the kitchen. The old man had slapped his face, then took him outside when he was made to walk and walk and walk. He could still remember the biting cold that set in. Once he was awake and his father's drunken ignorance. His father walked him until early daylight, and he remembered that he prayed that he would never get that cold again. Now he could feel the cold setting in. Sandra! Sandra! He called out suddenly. He felt something cold on his head and he tried to brush it away. Take it easy, Daddy, take it easy, she cautioned as she continued to wipe the sweat off his brow. Please, honey, please, the cold. I'm so cold. Take it away, please, he begged. Quickly, Sandra removed the face cloth. Then she took off all her clothes except her panties and bra. She slipped under the cover next to him and wrapped her arms around his body. The flow of blood from his wound didn't disturb her. Even though she could feel the warm blood on her stomach, she only gripped him tighter. Is that better, baby? She asked, praying that her body brought him the warmth he sought. The cold. It's better, honey, he replied, holding her even closer. They lay like that, giving comfort to each other as the day began to slip away. From her, he drew strength, and from him, she drew faith. Chapter 14. Horner wiped the back of his eyes with his hands. If they didn't quit soon, he'd fall asleep in the goddamn car, he believed. He glanced at his partner, who was sipping a cup of hot coffee. They had finally stopped for lunch. Horner folded up the cup and the napkin his hamburger had come in. Food wasn't what he'd wanted, but food was what he got. I got one more idea I'd like to see out, Jerry, before we go in, Fisher stated as he finished with his food. What's that? Horner asked, not too interested in what his partner had in mind. It had been too many hours without a nap, and now all he could see were red spots in front of his eyes. That apartment Jim's wife told us about. You know, the one she said Sandra picked up the clothes at. I'd like to check that one out before we call it a day, Fisher answered as he glanced up at his partner. He knew the young man was tired, but they were too close to ending it. He could feel it. The case was about to bust open. Horner didn't feel like that at all. He believed the case could go on for days or weeks or even months. It depended on how well the girl hid out. If she had found an apartment that they couldn't locate, it was good and possible. From all her actions, she seemed to be smart. As if he had read Horner's mind, Fisher spoke up. The way I see it, she didn't have time to find another apartment. Either she's jammed up in a motel or she's gone back to one of her old places. There's nothing else she could do. With a wounded man, she hasn't too many choices. You're right about that, Horner agreed reluctantly. But if she's in a motel, the only chance we have is someone picking up the license number on the car. You've got all the patrol cars checking out all the close motels, so it's just a matter of time. But if by chance she's got a friend with a house, we're in trouble. It might be a week or maybe a little before this case breaks. Yeah, I know all that, Fisher answered harshly. But I just don't think it's going to go like that. No, they're young kids, and I don't think they know many people like that. Plus, the fact that he's wounded. That's the big issue here. With him bleeding like hell, she has to be real damn careful where she takes him. You can bet on that part of it. As much as this girl cares about him, she's not going to take too many chances. I was thinking about what that guy's sister told us, Horner began. If her brother hadn't stuck this girl up, I doubt if any of this crap would have happened. I guess that guy Chink must have blown his top when he saw his woman all beat to hell and back. Fisher nodded his head and he started the motor and pulled out of the drive-in restaurant. Yeah, I think from his actions he must have cared quite a bit for the girl. He killed everybody involved, as far as I can see. As the men drove back across town, they talked the case over. They had just about put it completely together. The more I think about it, the surer I am that she doubled back to the apartment that she moved out of, Fisher said, nodding his head as he spoke. And the more he talked about it, the more sure Horner became. He began to get the feeling that overcame him whenever he felt himself closing in on his prey. It fits the picture, all right, he stated. Sandra finally got Chink to fall asleep peacefully. She waited until she was sure he was sound asleep before she got up. She slipped on her pants, then went into the kitchen to see if she could find anything for them to eat. She prayed that she wouldn't have to go out to the store. She searched and found some cold lunch meat and a bottle of pop. It would have to do. She fixed 2 sandwiches, but common sense told her Chink wouldn't be able to eat this. How nice it would be if they were on the highway, maybe going to New York or someplace. She sat down and ate her sandwich while she daydreamed. When she finished eating, she got up and glanced out the window. Sandra froze in her tracks as she watched the white man with his colored partner get out of their car. Cop was written all over them. As she watched them, they walked over to Sandra's car and opened the door. The 2 men talked amongst themselves for a few moments, unaware that the young girl upstairs in the window never took her eyes off them. Well, Jerry, Fisher said, looks like we found what we came after. Yeah, Horner replied. There's no doubt about it now. They're holed up here, all right. You think we should call for help? I don't think we'll need it, Jerry. The guy's been wounded, so the girl shouldn't give us too much trouble. She might even be glad to see us. That way, she could get her man to the hospital. Horner shrugged. He was thinking about the string of dead bodies that had led them down the couple's trail. If you say so, Fish, but I feel a lot better off with a little more help, he said honestly. Okay then, Fisher replied. If you feel that way, go on and call it in. It won't take but a few minutes before we'll have more than enough reinforcements. For a brief second, Horner felt ashamed. But then, the vivid recollection of the last dead body came to him. He walked back to their car and called in. When he finished, he joined his partner on the sidewalk. Fisher wasn't going to wait for help. Hell, man, if you feel too frightened, Jerry, I'll take care of it myself, he said as he went up the steps. Before they had reached the stairway, Sandra had wheeled around and run into the bathroom. She glanced around wildly, looking for the pistols she had laid down. Snatching up one, she ran back to the window. She waited until they were on the stairs, then broke the glass with the barrel. She quickly raised the gun and squeezed off a shot. The sound of the breaking glass had been all the warning the 2 detectives needed, though. Both men had jumped over the railing back down to the ground at the sound of the glass breaking. The shots had only given speed to their move. Jerry Horner wiped the sweat from his brow. He glanced over at his partner. Hey, Fish, he called out with a smile. I ain't seen you move that fast in I don't know how long. Fisher had to smile back at his partner. Both men had moved so quickly that there hadn't been time for any kind of warning between them. Yeah, it goes like that at times. I wonder who's handling that pistol up there, Fisher said, stroking his chin. Horner only shook his head. I don't know, but it seems as if they don't intend to give up easy. I'll tell you what I want you to do for me, Jerry, Fisher began. I need a screen so that I can make it up those steps. So when I count to 3, you pump a few shots into that window so that whoever is standing there will have to duck back. That will give me all the time I need to make it up the stairs. Before the men could go into action, a patrol car pulled up. Wait a minute, Fish, Horner called out. Wait until them boys get over here. Then we can both run up the stairs together. The sound of 3 fast shots came to the waiting men. The patrolmen ducked back down behind their car. You better yell out to them so they'll know what to do. It looks like our help is pinned down, Fisher stated. Slip around that way, he said, pointing out where a garage was built under the apartment building. Go through there and give them their instructions, and I'll wait until you get back. Upstairs, Sandra stared at the gun in her hands. She didn't want to accept the truth that she was out of bullets. She tossed the gun down and walked into the kitchen. When she returned, she went to the bed and sat down on it beside Chink. The noise of the shooting had awakened him, and his eyes were bright as he stared at her. "Hey, honey, the man done found us already, huh?" he asked as he tried to hold her hand. "Yeah, Daddy, they're outside," she answered honestly as she tried to hold back the tears. "I only wish that it hadn't went like this, Sandra. There was so much we could have done together." She only shook her head. What was there to say? In a few minutes, the police would be inside the apartment. It was finished. All over. Sandra picked up his hand and kissed it. "Honey, remember how peaceful it was the day we first walked home from school? The birds were singing, the sun was hot on our backs, and you were so bashful." Chink smiled up at her. I remember that, and much more, honey. I remember every time we were together. It's something that nobody can ever take away from us. You'll always have your memories, Sandra. Keep them, and please think about me sometimes. The tears flowed down her cheeks unchecked. "How can I ever forget you, Chink?" She leaned over and kissed him. "You've given me the happiest times of my life, Daddy. I'll never be able to get you out of my mind. Never." He smiled at her tenderly. "Remember your promise, honey. You ain't gonna let them take me out of here alive, baby. I don't want to die in no motherfucking prison. Because if they get me to a hospital, they're gonna do their damnness to keep me living." The sound of breaking glass came to them as the police shot out the front window. Under the hail of bullets, Fisher and Horner ran up the steps. Both men hugged the side of the building, breathing hard. "Damn, I'm getting out of shape," Fisher said, breathing hard. Horner glanced over at his partner and grinned. He knew how the older man felt running up those steps. Expecting to be shot at was something he could do without. The men inched up to the door and then stood on each side of it. Fisher raised his pistol and shot the lock off. Then Horner raised his foot and kicked the door in. And as soon as it flew open, both men jumped into the apartment, each hitting the floor on a different side of the door. They glanced around the living room in astonishment. Then Horner pointed out the empty gun on the floor. Fisher crawled over to the gun and picked it up. He broke the gun open, then showed it to his partner so that Horner could see that the gun was empty. Both men glanced at the closed bedroom door. Sandra knew that the policemen were in the living room. She glanced down at Chink. She could see the fear in his eyes as he stared up into her face. She leaned down and kissed him, and as she held him close, he tried to put his arms around her, but it took too much of his strength. He dropped his arms back on the bed. When Sandra finished kissing him, she raised up suddenly. The knife she kept concealed in her pants outfit flashed once in the afternoon sunlight as she brought it down quickly. She struck him in the chest, then pulled the knife out and struck again, and he closed his eyes. "You don't ever have to worry about them locking you up no more, Daddy," she said quietly, and let the knife drop from her hand. She leaned over and began to sob, and when the bedroom door flew open, she didn't even bother to glance up. The two officers entered the room cautiously. They watched the couple on the bed warily. The sight was one that neither man would ever forget. Sandra neither glanced up at the men nor acknowledged them. She continued to lie at the side of her man, crying deep sobs that seemed to come from the bottom of her soul. From where they stood, they couldn't tell if she was hurt or not. Her arms and the white blouse she wore were saturated with blood. "Don't worry, Daddy," they heard her say in a husky whisper. "You're free now, honey. You're free. They will never lock you up again." As they moved near the bed, Fisher noticed her hand fumbling around in the bedsheets. It was the only warning they had. She moved so fast that she almost caught them unaware. Her hand came up, clutching the knife she had used. Blood still dripped from the blade. There was a blur of motion as she attempted to drive the dripping blade into her own frail chest. But Fisher moved fast. He grabbed her from behind as his partner watched in surprise. There was a brief struggle before he could take the knife from her. Then, all at once, she crumpled up and fell on the side of her bed next to her lover. Though tears ran down her cheeks, there was no sound. Her grief was hers and hers alone. Whether she was tried for his death or not didn't make any difference to her now. All that mattered was that her man was free. He was free at last. This concludes this mini-series on this edition of Ralph Reads. I would like to personally thank you, Queens and Kings, fellow royalty, for stopping by. You guys may connect with me on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Periscope at RGMC2407. Drop an email to rgmc2407@gmail.com, where if you would like to leave a small donation, you may also use the Zelle app or paypal.me/RGMC2407 or the Cash App. My cash tag is RGMC2407. You may also find me on my very own channel, RGMC, Ralph Garcia, Master of Ceremonies, as well as right here at home on the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Fellow royalty, pick up a good book, read a good story, and set your good self free. I appreciate you, and I love you like cooked food. I will see you folks on the next edition of Ralph Reads. Saraz Van Kanaka.